at 573-746-8020, and I would love to hear from you. I yesterday was interrupted and never got uh, a whole lot of what I intended to get done. As anybody who knows me knows that I end up speaking far too much and kept on going and discussion and after discussion with myself. So I want to continue in that vein today because I just happen to like it. I'm glad you're here and listening. So let us. And now I gave a little bit of a hint yesterday. I grew up Mormon, and so and I guess it really doesn't mean anything. But I was reading a little book here recently. It's called General Ignorance. There's a lot of it out there. And one section of the book is dedicated toward religion and some of the things. There's a worldwide domination. And the the title is called One Reptile to Rule Them All. Now, as we all know, there's religion going on everywhere on the planet. And sometimes it causes things like war and stuff like that. And I read a very interesting entire chapter about a guy, and I didn't know this, and I grew up Mormon. And this chapter is called, and it's pretty small, so it was an interesting story, I thought. And I mean, who knows what? And I don't like to make fun of people's religion. You know, there are people that believe in the universe. There are people that believe in God. There are people that believe in I don't know what. Strange underworld adventures. And I don't criticize. You know, if you can believe as you like. I am generally, as all people who grew up Mormon, Christians. You know, that's the basics of that church, the Christian church. So I grew up just Christian as everybody else. I may not get that far into it anymore, but I wanted to read something interesting because this I didn't know, and I considered myself somewhat of a historian. When I was in my senior year of high school, my lovely parents, my dad was one of the nicest guys on the planet, and my mom was always a lot of fun. And we tormented them. There were, 12 of us children, and it can't be easy dealing with 12 children. Well, I was among the worst, let's say that, as far as causing problems and, being a foolish young man and blah, blah, blah. But it was, we had a lot of fun. And my father was very, very much into Mormon history. And when I was a senior in high school, I had gone to school for all of my high school years in Minnesota, middle of nowhere, farming community. And in my senior year, we relocated to a place in Illinois, or south of Nauvoo, Illinois. Now, if you know your Mormon history, you know the Mormons were the city of Nauvoo, which is on the Mississippi River, was 36,000 people large at the time when Chicago had less than 10,000 residents, is one of the statistics that I remember. And a lot of people were very fearful of the fact that, you remember Joseph Smith was killed, that he was attracting too large a following and too much in politics and all of that. And when we moved to Illinois, my father bought a newspaper called the Nauvoo Neighbor, and Nauvoo was the town, and my sister still lives there. My mother still lives there. We used to run around there, and my dad owned the newspaper, little small town, 1,000 people. And I only tell you all this because I went to college my first year in a place called Quincy, Illinois, a place called Quincy college at the time. Now I think it's called Quincy University. And the teacher, one of my several of my teachers there were fathers. Were well, and I don't mean father. I mean religious. They're priests. And so I used to love sitting in there, and they had these libraries of the Quincy, the Nauvoo paper, the Chicago papers that you could read from the 1800s when this was all a big deal, and I liked reading up on history, and I did quite a bit of it at that college library. And my father, did it as well, and at any rate, I thought I knew some Mormon history. I have all my father's tapes. He passed away some time ago. 1507, I think it was, is when he passed away. And before he passed away, he had done some recordings. He was very big in Mormon church history. And so he was in the middle of writing a book. He was a tour guide long as I can remember. When we lived in Salt Lake City when I was a kid, we used to go to, on weekends, he would give tours at the Temple Square, the Mormon temple, and he would take one of the kids along to listen to him tell about history of the Mormon Church and all that. And I remember participating in those things quite a bit back then. And I also remember being very, very much interested in history as a whole anyway. At any rate, I was thumbing through this book that's called General Ignorance. There's a lot of it out there. And I came across something that I just didn't know. And I hope you find it as interesting as I do, because it's a story of... It's a religious story, and it is called, and it's very short. It'll take me 10 minutes to read it, and it's like a trivia book. It's a lot of fun, and so I have a lot of these laying around. Like I said, that my kids would buy me, and sometimes I thumb through them, finding something interesting. Well. This chapter is called America's Island King. Okay? Few people would believe that a separate empire with its own full-fledged king once existed within the borders of the United States of America. But James Jesse Strang was indeed crowned ruler of a Lake Michigan island kingdom in the mid-1800s. His bizarre road to royalty, though, began in southeastern Wisconsin. Strang was born in 1813 in Scipio, New York. He moved to Wisconsin in 1843 with his wife Mary to a large parcel of land just west of what would become the city of Burlington. Strang set up a law practice and, thanks to his family connections, met the Mormon prophet Joseph Smith on a trip to Nauvoo, Illinois. Strang's rise to fame began as Smith immediately appointed him an elder in the faith and authorized him to start a Mormon stake in Wisconsin, named Voree, which meant Garden of Peace. Mormons from around the country flocked to Voree to build homes on the rolling forested tract along the White River. Few months after Strang became a Mormon, Joseph Smith was killed. To everyone's amazement, Strang produced a letter that appeared to have been written and signed by Joseph Smith, which named Strang as the church's next prophet. Another leader named Brigham Young, whom you may have heard of, also claimed that title, and Young eventually won. As a result, Strang broke away to form his own branch. In September 1845, Strang made a stunning announcement. He said that a divine revelation had told him to dig under an oak tree in Voree, located on a low-rise called the Hill of Promise. 4 followers armed with shovels dug under the tree and unearthed a box containing some small brass plates, each only a few inches tall. The plates were covered with hieroglyphics, crude drawings of a White River settlement area, and a vaguely Native American human figure holding a scepter. Strang said he was able to translate them using special stones, like the ones Joseph Smith had used to translate similar buried plates in New York. The writing, Strang said, was from a lost tribe of Israel that somehow made it to North America. He managed to show the plates to hundreds of people before they mysteriously disappeared. As his number of followers grew, he created subgroups among them. There was the commune-style Order of Enoch, the secretive Illuminati, who pledged their allegiance to Strang as sovereign lord and king on earth. Infighting developed within the ranks, though, and area non-Mormons also raised objection to the community. Some Burlington residents even went so far as to try to persuade wagon loads of Voree-bound immigrants not to join Strang. In 1849, Strang received a second set of divine messages, called the Plates of Laban. He said they had originally been carried in the Ark of the Covenant. They contained instructions called the Book of the Law of the Lord, which Strang again translated. The plates were not shown to the group at that time, but they did eventually yield support, some would say rather conveniently, for the controversial practice of polygamy. Strang had personal reasons for getting divine approval to have multiple wives. In July 1849, a 19-year-old woman named Elvira Field secretly became Strang's second wife. There was just one little problem. He hadn't divorced the first one. Soon, Field was traveling with him, posing as a young man named Charlie Douglas, with her hair cut short and wearing a man's black suit. Yet the clever disguise did little to hide Field's figure. At about that time, Strang claimed another angel visited to tell him it was time to get out of Voree. Strang was to lead his people to a land surrounded by water and covered in timber. This land, according to Strang, was Beaver Island, the largest of a group of islands in the Beaver Archipelago north of Charlevoix, Michigan. It had recently been opened to settlement, and the Strangites moved there in the 1840s. On July 8, 1850, Strang donned a crown and a red cape as his followers dubbed him King of Beaver Island. Falling short of becoming King of the United States, he was later elected to Michigan's state legislature, thanks to strong voter turnout among his followers. Perhaps reveling in his new power, eventually he took 3 more young wives, for a total of 5. On the island, Strang's divine revelations dictated every aspect of life. He mandated that women wear bloomers and that their skirts measure a certain length, required severe lashings for adultery, forbade cigarettes and alcohol. Under his strict rule, some followers began to rebel. In addition, relations with local fishermen soured as the colony's businesses prospered. On June 16, 1856, a colony member named Thomas Bedford, who had previously been publicly whipped, recruited an accomplice and then shot Strang. The king survived for several weeks and was taken back to Voree by his young wives. He died in his parents' stone house, which still stands near Mormon Road on State Highway 11. At the time, all 4 of his young wives were pregnant. And back in Michigan, it wasn't long before local enemies and mobs of vigilantes from the mainland forcibly removed his followers from Beaver Island. James Jesse Strang was buried in Voree, but his remains were later moved to a cemetery in Burlington. A marker, which has a map of the old community, stands just south of Highway 11 where it crosses the White River, and several of the old cobblestone houses used by group members are preserved and bear historical markers. Strang's memory also lives on in the religious group formed by several of his followers, the reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Now, I didn't know I thought that story went somewhat differently, and maybe someone knows the history. And I don't know why I thought that was interesting, but since it's my show, I will provide what I like. And I am interested in all forms of history. And I think that was, strange times indeed with what goes on in American culture, huh? So I hope you enjoyed that little story. I saw quite a few uh, interesting, I don't know what to call them, videos, I suppose, small shows on YouTube, which I liked to watch and listen to, and I did, in fact, listen to quite a few of them. If you would like to send me any information, any questions, that can be done at Samuel T at internationalflavor.com. You can listen to my show on internationalflavor.podbean.com, and I'd be happy to speak with you. There's been a lot of news going on today, so let's talk about some of it, if you don't mind. There's been Pokrovsk is under siege. That one is a little bit too long. There's found out that somebody is claiming that forbidden books, history books from 1763, say that Russia has been around for 4,410 years. That's kind of interesting. That was an interesting video to listen to. That actually came out about a year ago, 1.9 million views, but it's in Russian. You can't listen to it in English. And I was unable to get the subtitles to play properly either. And so I will listen to it all for you. I only listened to the first 10 minutes or so, and it would be definitely worth listening to should you have the opportunity. Lots of news. The U.S. blocked G7 condemnation of Russia's over Sumy strike. Now, I read you some of what was going on in Sumy the other day, where the Russians claim one thing and the Ukrainians claim another. And in the U.S., I find this very interesting. What the U.S. is actually doing here. They are forcing Europe to take their own stand here. Moscow has said that the missile attack in the Sumy region was attacked senior Ukrainian and foreign military officers. And U.S. President Trump's administration reportedly refused to back a G7 statement condemning Russia's recent missile strike on the Ukrainian city of Sumy, cited by Bloomberg. On Monday, the Russian Defense Ministry confirmed firing 2 Iskander-M missiles the day before, targeting a gathering of Ukrainian and Western command staff, killing at least 60 senior servicemen. Ukrainian authorities, however, including Zelensky, have claimed that Russian missiles struck a military awards ceremony, leaving 35 civilians dead and 129 others injured. Following the attack, Ukraine and a number of its backers accused Russia of deliberately targeting civilians and undermining peace talks. According to Bloomberg, the G7, which is being presided over by Canada this year, drafted a joint statement denouncing the strike on Sumy, but has not released it due to a lack of U.S. support. In a draft of the statement seen by the outlet, The group said the attack was proof that Russia was determined to continue hostilities. Bloomberg reported that Trump's team told the group that it couldn't sign the statement because it is working to preserve the space to negotiate peace. Since taking office in January, Trump has pushed to get Moscow and Kyiv to the negotiating table, has resumed direct contact with Russia in order to facilitate peace. Throughout the Ukraine conflict, Moscow maintains that it never targets civilian infrastructure. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov recently emphasized that Russia strikes military targets. Russian officials also state that Moscow remains open to peaceful resolution of the Ukraine conflict, but have stressed that any settlement must address the root causes of the problem. Moscow has demanded that Kyiv demilitarize, denazify, give up NATO ambitions, adhere to a position of neutrality, and recognize territorial realities on the ground. There was an kind of a smart-ass article, statement from Lavrov that was put out a little while ago. The European NATO want a new Hofführer in Ukraine. This according to Sergei Lavrov. Military bloc members want the country's government to remain a Nazi regime hostile to Russia, said the foreign minister. This one's also not very long, and it's crazy the statements that are coming out on both sides of this horror story that is Ukraine. European NATO states are working to sustain a Russophobic regime in Ukraine by finding another Hofführer to replace Vladimir Zelensky. Should he be ousted, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said. In an interview published Monday by Kommersant, Lavrov stated that while Western powers are talking about sending peacekeepers to Ukraine, they are actually trying to strengthen the anti-Russian foothold in the country. Instead of seeking a real settlement, they have come up with a resilience force. In other words, in order to maintain Ukraine's resilience, they are not going to send blockade troops, but the military of civilized Western countries, said Lavrov. These troops will protect the same regime, he said, adding that even if European NATO members agree to allow a new election in Ukraine, they will make every effort to make sure that the political landscape remains the same. Europe will do everything to ensure that the regime does not change its essence, said Lavrov. They'll find some new Hofführer, but the essence of the regime will remain. Zelensky's presidential term expired in May of 2024, but the Ukrainian leader refuses to call new elections, citing martial law. Russia has declared him illegitimate, claiming that under such circumstances the true legal authority lies with Ukrainian parliament. Now, I disagree with that because the Ukrainian parliament, all of their terms have also run out, or a good number of them. So you don't have a legitimate government in power at all in Ukraine. Lavrov went on to say that instead of pressuring Zelensky to stop suppressing Russian language rights, European countries insist on supporting Kiev to the bitter end. All these peacekeeping schemes drawn up by the Macrons and Starmers of the world are based on the need to preserve at least a piece of land where a Nazi, openly Russophobic regime will remain, geared toward preparing another war against Russia, as was done with the Minsk agreements, said Lavrov. He was referring to the now-defunct deal first reached in 2014, which was designed to give the regions of Donetsk and Lugansk special status within the Ukrainian state. Former Ukrainian President Pyotr Poroshenko since admitted that Kyiv's main goal was to use the ceasefire to buy time and create powerful armed forces, which idea was later echoed by former German Chancellor Angela Merkel and former French President Francois Hollande. Russia has warned against the deployment of unauthorized peacekeepers on Ukraine, saying they will be regarded as legitimate targets. Thus, the restaurant that was blown up the other day. Lavrov earlier stated that Moscow opposed the idea of NATO troops in Ukraine, regardless of whether they are under foreign flag, under the flag of the European Union, or various national flags. Loony stuff, folks. I haven't had a chance to read this one yet, but I wanted to, and so you're going to get it at the same time as me. Usually I have a chance to read them before I put them out to you and make sure I know what my thoughts are on them before I ship them out to you. But I like the title of this one. It is, the title is Vance Blasts Zelensky for Absurd Claim. The Ukrainian leader earlier suggested that Washington is under Moscow's influence. U.S. President J.D. Vance has accused Vladimir Zelensky of making absurd statements after he suggested that Washington is on Russia's side in the conflict between Moscow and Kiev. In an interview with CBS News on Sunday, Zelensky claimed that Russian narratives are prevailing in the U.S. What, you mean the truth? And that Moscow has enormous influence on the administration of U.S. President Donald Trump and its policy. Responding in a conversation with the Unheard outlet published on Tuesday, Vance described Zelensky's remarks as not productive. I think it is sort of absurd for Zelensky to tell the U.S. government, which is currently keeping his entire government and war effort together, that we are somehow on the side of the Russians, he said. If you want to end the conflict, you have to try and understand where both the Russians and the Ukrainians see their strategic objectives. That does not mean you morally support the Russian cause or that you support full-scale invasion. But you do have to try and understand what are the strategic red lines. In the same way, you have to try to understand what Ukrainians are trying to get out of the conflict. I'd like to know what that is, by the way. Members of the Trump administration are not on anyone's side. We are on America's side, Vance insisted. Trump and Vance publicly clashed with Zelensky during his visit to the White House in late February, accusing the Ukrainian leader of disrespect toward the U.S., failing to appreciate American aid, and not being interested in achieving peace with Russia. I wholeheartedly agree with that little commentary. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov told the Kommersant newspaper in an interview published Tuesday that Moscow appreciates that the Trump administration is trying to get to the bottom of the issue and, most importantly, understand the root causes of the Ukraine conflict. Lavrov also noted that Trump has repeatedly said that the colossal mistake which led to the current events in Ukraine was Biden administration's decision to drag Ukraine into NATO. Ukrainian neutrality remains one of the Moscow's key demands for settlement of the conflict, along with demilitarization, denazification of Ukraine, and the recognition by Kiev that Crimea, Donetsk, Lugansk, and Kherson and Zaporizhia regions are permanently part of Russia. Very, very firm and consistent in those discussions and have been for quite some time. Everyone has been very firm about this, except for the old Z monster. The Z man just, he wants things that are never going to be given him. It's just not going to happen. What were we seeing today? There was an interesting article about Ukrainian war possibly spreading to Moldova and Georgia. I don't know if you listen to, if you haven't, you need to listen to Professor Dyson. And I want to, is he from Finland or Norway? I can't remember, but we're going to listen to the first 5 minutes of this because it's quite interesting what we need to hear. Let's see. Have a listen to this.
Hi everyone and welcome. Today we are joined by Dmitry Polyansky, the first deputy permanent representative of the Russian Federation to the United Nations. Welcome, Mr. Polyansky. It's always good to see you.
Thank you, man. Pleasure.
You have recently expressed concerns about the political stability in Moldova, and I guess many observers have, especially since the election. So I wanted to ask you, how do you see it? What has happened in Moldova over the past few years?
Well, it's difficult to say concisely what is there, and we don't want to meddle into the domestic affairs of this country. But we're very much worried with the political trend that is happening there. Actually, the country is now between two elections. They had a presidential election last year, which was, I would say, very doubtful to a lot of people because the majority of the votes that Maya Sandu needed to get this to get elected were provided not from Moldova itself, but they were provided from abroad, and they were provided from abroad from the countries which were predictably more pro-European, and where the Moldovans living in this country, of course, will cast their vote for Maya Sandu. And in the countries like mine, for example, where is a big number of Moldovans and who were very much eager to vote, there was very scarce possibility to do it, and the embassy was the only polling station where they could cast their votes. So the numbers of possible votes against Maya Sandu was artificially limited. I wouldn't say that this is a democratic situation, and still she came, her lead came at a very knife edge, I would say, in a very knife edge way. So it was like fraction of percent. And this was also very doubtful, and given the fact that this country is divided, and it's very much divided, it used to be divided, it is still divided, almost 50-50 to those who would support better relations with the European Union and those who want closer ties with Russia. And of course, you need to take into consideration this kind of dichotomy that they have and give it a good political planning. And try not to rock the boat too much. But on the contrary, what the ruling class is now trying to do, they try to kind of attack everything Russian. They try to attack opposition figures who speak for better ties with Russia ahead of parliamentary elections, which are scheduled. They're not scheduled yet, as far as I understand, but they are projected to take place either in summer or in autumn. Sometime this close. So this, of course, electrifies the electoral situation in this country. This triggers divisions and protests. And we especially reacted to the fact when the leader of the autonomous Gagauzia region was arrested and detained for clearly political grounds. And she herself said, Mrs. Gutsul said that the reasons for her arrest were merely political, and we couldn't ignore this. We saw what turn situation could take if we ignore this kind of situation. So we raised this issue in the Security Council. We asked for closed meeting, closed consultations on the Security Council on this issue, and then I addressed the press afterwards, giving them the elements of our position. That's what we have. I know that Mrs. Gutsul is still detained, I think she's no longer in prison, but she's still under house arrest. And she herself wrote a letter to Secretary General Guterres, telling of what kind of a witch hunt is happening in her country, and that's why it's also very worrying, the whole trend. We don't think that it's good to prosecute opposition politicians in the way it is being done in Moldova, and this looms bad. This looms potential escalation of the situation in this part of Europe, and it is close to Ukraine, and there are a lot of people in Ukraine who want to destabilize situation in Moldova and who want to bring Moldova within this circle of anti-Russian alliance, as they put it, and they want to kind of trigger some internal conflict in Moldova to punish all those who want good ties with Russia, in the way Ukraine did itself in 2014. So they want the same drastic change in Moldovan politics. That's why, given all this, we believe that we had all the reasons to ring the alarm bell in the Security Council because of what's happening in this country and because of the consequences that can follow if we just turn a blind eye to what's happening in this country.
Yes, quite quite interesting that yet again in another country, the opposition to whoever's in power or whoever you don't want to win, they are using what they refer to in the United States as lawfare to keep them off of the ballot. Russia, at the Security Council, and many others at the Security Council have been bringing these topics up for the last 5, 7, 10 years, quite often. They claim it in Georgia. They claim it in Ukraine. It's going on in Ukraine right now. People are arrested that are to run against Zelensky. They get arrested. Any opponents are jailed. They are charged with crimes. They are charged with corruption, just like what we experienced in America last year. If the government works for you, you can twist it to your own uses. And it's funny to me that with today's ability to get out information the way that I am getting out information, the way that people on YouTube are getting out information, that small, correct groups of people are bringing the truth to light. These people think they can just continue to arrest. I mean, obviously they can, because they're still doing it, and can treat the rest of the people just as, I don't know what, as non-citizens, as worthless parts. I watched something today that I definitely want to get to, that I know a lot of you don't necessarily follow the monetary streams that I follow. But I watch World Affairs in Context, if you remember that. And she has always got interest. You don't have to agree with it all, but she does provide some interesting content. And she had one, her name is, well, she's on the channel World Affairs in Context, and it's only 8-9 minutes long, and I am telling you, this is accurate, and I I don't always agree with this young lady, but I do on this. And if you don't understand the interplay between sanctions, tariffs, BRICS, and monetary policy, and especially related to U.S. debt, this is a good, quick 8-minute blurb into it for you. So let's roll on in there and let's listen to some of the things that she has to say, because she's absolutely correct, ladles and jelly spoons. Here it goes.
Thank you so much for being here today. If you're new here, make sure that you are subscribed to worldaffairsIncontext.com for more content. You'll find interviews there and so much more. And do consider supporting my work. It is very much appreciated. Today, we're diving into a surprising twist in global economics, how President Trump's tariffs, originally meant to protect the U.S. economy and to protect U.S. manufacturing, may have actually pushed investors away from American markets and triggered a shift in global capital. So let's break that down. For decades, the world saw the United States as the safest place to invest. Every year, nearly $2 trillion flow into the country, buying stocks, buying bonds, funding businesses, and so much more. In fact, America's share of global capital flows jumped to 41% after the pandemic. But you know what? That has already changed. The loss of confidence in the United States dollar as a global reserve currency has accelerated since the introduction of new tariffs, and it increased economic instability globally. As you can see here, the share of the US dollar as a global reserve currency has been on a downward spiral. Right now, its share stands at roughly 57%.
Now, this is an interesting graphic that comes out. The dollar's share as a percent of the global reserve currency in 2015 was 66%, meaning people were using the dollar as the backing for their own currencies. For whatever reserves they needed, they were buying the dollar. And with that, it gave us the ability to buy even more. And the more people that buy it, the stronger your economy is. Now, also, they were buying not necessarily dollars that existed. They were buying dollars that were created. And they were created by more debt. More U.S. debt, selling of bonds, selling of treasuries, selling of government debt. Okay, and so as you see this interesting quarterly readout from 2015 to the present over the last 10 years, and we had fully 66% of the global capital was ours under the dollar, and right now it is fully 10% less than that, 57%. And it gets worse, but just that factor all by itself is a big factor. So now 67% of the economies of the world are not using the dollar. It's actually speeding up what they are doing. They're using their own currencies. They're flocking to other stronger currencies than ours, buying other strong debt. I've been reporting here that I've been watching the unloading of U.S. debt for a long time, that I have been watching. And every quarter, China's getting rid of $60 billion. Every quarter, so's Japan and France. I mean, pick the allies of ours. They're doing the same. So let's follow along.
And it continues to decline. Trump's whiplash tariffs, allegedly aimed at boosting American industries, had an unintended consequence. And I should add here, unintended but quite predictable consequence. When you prioritize political agenda over economic reasons, when you implement your trade policies, this is what happens, this is what you get. Instead of strengthening the US dollar, tariffs weakened the global reserve currency. Tariffs coupled with using economic sanctions as a weapon against your non-aligned states, and of course, the elephant in the room, US debt crisis. We're now looking at $37 trillion in national debt. Interest costs.
That is scary. And she has the calendar of the debt, the debt clock going up, and you can see it. And she also has it juxtaposed against other debt portions. So the U.S. national debt, $36,724,000,000,000. The debt per citizen is $107,000, and the debt per taxpayer is $323,000. The official budget of the United States, money that comes in every year, is $2 trillion. Well, you know what we're going to do? We're going to continue with that in just a minute. Caller, are you with me? Can you hear me?
Yes, Sam, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I absolutely can. Hope everything is well with you.
It is. Well, except for this fraudulent fiat currency that we're all basing everything off of. Everything is fraudulent when it's based on a fiat money supply. And when I say fiat, it means fake. It means in place of. It means other than, And I'm sure you probably know this. You've traveled the world a great deal. You probably had to exchange currencies from time to time. And there's this currency exchange rate that is one fiat exchange rate against another. And until we get back to a commodity-based or real value-based monetary system, we're doomed. Because the bankers, the lawyers, no offense, the insurance company, it's all a house of cards, Sam. It's a house of cards. The legal system, the monetary system, the insurance game, it's all rigged. And it's a what do you call it? It's a club. It's a club that those in charge, those big money changers and those Judas goats use to beat us over the head. And what we have to do as sovereign citizens, and I'm going to go ahead and use this word, of the planet, of the globe, sovereign citizens of the globe, not just the United States, not just Russia, not just, those countries that claim to be, I hate to use this word, but lowercase democracies, lowercase d democracies, which is nothing more than two wolves and a sheep deciding what's for supper. Until we get beyond that, and until intelligent, sentient human beings, spiritual beings on this planet rally against those control freaks, I don't know, we're doomed to be slaves.
Well, I agree with you on that thought process. I agree with you on the need to change things, but I know I also say this fairly frequently, that I love JR's optimism and how his stories always end in American victory, and I wish I was as optimistic. But I watch numbers like this, like I watch people I do not always agree with, and this lady that I'm playing her her part for right now. I don't. But she's very well spoken, and she makes very good points. And on this one in particular, I fully support what she is saying here, because we're watching the even right now under Trump, the federal budget deficit, federal spending officially is $7 trillion and some change a year. Federal budget deficit, which everybody knows is the amount of expenses minus the amount of income, is positive to the amount of $2 trillion and some change. So every year we're going into debt another $2 trillion, and I'm not telling people anything they don't already know. But at some point, the rest of the world ain't playing. And they aren't going to, and especially when you and Donald Trump is very much guilty of this. And I listened to it not until after he won. He didn't say anything about it until he won, when he wants to use sanctions and tariffs to goad compliance. And I'm not an anti-tariff guy. I'm anti how he did tariffs. As I told you told everyone yesterday, a few days ago, I'm pretty consistent in how I argue about those things. If he'd have done it much quietly and targeted not everyone, but targeted people that needed to be targeted, individually and not at some grand stage, he could have stretched it. What's the point that it has to be done right now? Now, arguably, you could say he has to save America and he has to save America right now. But what this girl is pointing out, and I tend to agree with, is that sometimes the very act of attempting to save is the catalyst that makes it worse. I listened to a Chinese one that I would like to get to today, but I probably won't. But there was a Chinese economist being interviewed in English over the weekend, and she said something similar to what I'm saying. If you think that you can dictate to Xi Jinping what he is going to do, you better think again, because he's a calm and structured and reasoned thinker. And they know how to play the long game in China. And Trump wants to play this, super fast full court press game that, you play in the last 5 minutes of the game. And the rest of them are going, well, but we're not in any hurry. We aren't. Our lead is pretty solid. We're not in any hurry, and we don't need your. China does not need our market. Do they want it? Oh yes, they absolutely do. But the point of this girl is we don't need your market, not remotely, and that is, I think, improper thinking.
Yeah, I mean, if what you're saying is the woman that preaches or pronounces that China doesn't need the U.S. As a consumer, she's dead ass wrong. And so here, I've got 3 words in response to China's, and Xi Jinping's,
Tell me why she is dead ass wrong. Tell me why.
Well, because
I think she is too, but I want you to tell me why.
60%, at least 60% of their goods, if not more, maybe 80% of their goods into the U.S. market. And, the U.S. market is not...
That's not true anymore. That is not true anymore.
Well, let's take whatever percentage it is. And let's just say it's 10%. Let's just say it's 10%. And China and Xi wants to force the issue. I've got 3 words for them. It's the dam. It's the dam over there that with one, not even a nuclear strike, the Three Gorges Dam, not even a nuclear strike can hit that and render China helpless. hopeless and helpless. Reduce their populations by 2/3. And I'm not an advocate of that, but I'm just saying that that is not a nuclear, but a kinetic option. And China, Xi knows it. That's why they're just playing this word salad game, with the West, and Trump knows it too. And Trump is a bombastic figure. He's a guy that wants to make headlines, and that's what he's been his entire grown up life. And so what we have here is a decision between the haves and the have-nots. Whether we want the have-nots, the routine middle class, working class, maybe even slave class people in the world, those that are the 98%, the 98% of the population on the globe are have-nots, and then there's the 2% that are the haves, maybe 2%, probably 1%,
Maybe, yeah, that's right,
and 1/10 of 1%. So anyway, what I'm saying is these guys, these 1%ers or these half percenters that think they're going to dominate world politics and global government, they're left with a population of peasants. They're not going to win, because there's going to be nobody to consume. And what China needs more than anything are consumers. And what the U.S. needs more than anything is a fair field to play on, a level playing field. So I'm just saying that peace is number one on the list. Without peace, we got nothing. With war, we got warmongers, bomb builders, and baby killers, and they're no good. Nobody likes them. I mean, except for their own inbred little group of people, and we all know who they are. We all know who you bomb builders and baby killers and bloodsuckers are. We know who you are, and we don't want to come in and cut your throats. What we want you to do is just back off. Just back off. Just take your money and run and quit. Because if you don't, not only are you going to be exposed, but you're going to be eradicated. And they know it. These people, these vampires, these bloodsuckers, these rhinos, these Democrats that think they're in on the game, they are a bunch of failed losers. And they know it, Sam. And so here's what we have to do. We just keep our powder dry and we fight the good fight. We fight. And when I say we, I mean people like you, me, my kids, my grandkids, some of my extended family, not all, because some of my family thinks they're in on it. Some of my family actually thinks they're on, the right side of this tyranny, which they're brainwashed and troubled people. But just keep our powder dry. Don't go kinetic. Don't go starting, bloody battles. Just maintain the status quo and in search of peace and prosperity. And God is on our side, Sam. I believe it 100%, 1,000%. God's on our side. So I just say, let the news play and let us watch and let us play along and everything, but keep it in our hearts and keep it in our souls and keep it in our thoughts and prayers that we who are in search of peace and prosperity are on the right side of this spiritual war. So thanks for letting me preach, brother. I always love listening to your show. And Russia is not our enemy. China is not our enemy. Iran is not our enemy. Our enemy is us. Until we wake up and see ourselves for what we are, ignorant sheeple, then we're to blame, and we can only pray to God to save our souls. That's what I have to say.
I'm. What makes me happy that other people see that, and I think it's nice to know that you're not alone, and that that other people have the same sorts of. I don't want to see the U.S. fail, not remotely. I don't want to see anything bad happen to any of us, and the only reason to watch out for your families is and your country and your religions and all of that is because that is what any God that I believe to exist, that's what he wants of all people, of every. We're not supposed to go out and create war across the planet. We're not supposed to go out and build a better rocket. I suppose you should defend yourself, but I'm not so sure that we're supposed to be this warmongering group of countries that we appear to be. And you know my thoughts on that topic. I talk about them all the time. I very much appreciate your call, and I hope you have a good evening. Am I what?
Do you like music?
Oh yeah, all kinds.
Do you think you could travel up to the Lake of the Ozarks on August 1st and come and watch the group Train perform at the amphitheater?
I like to train. I always like to train.
I would love to meet you in person, and I know JR is going to be there, and I think it would be a fun time. If you can book it, I encourage you to do so. I would look forward to seeing you at the train show at the Lake of the Ozarks.
I try to get there a couple times a year because I got kids in that area, and I feel I'm connected. And frankly, I'm not so positive. I very much like Florida. I don't dislike Florida, but I don't necessarily like it. It's
come visit.
Yeah, I will do that. I appreciate you listening to the show. Thanks for joining in. I'm going to get back to where I was. Thank you and have a good evening.
You too. Bye.
And there he goes. On this screen of this young lady called World Affairs in Context, and her name is, why do I always forget? Lena Petrova. She also has the Doge clock, which shows the savings per taxpayer that Doge is cleaning up for us, allegedly, which I believe these numbers. I'm saying they're not numbers that I pulled off. I pulled them off of her site. I don't know where she gets it, but there you go. Savings per taxpayer is now $2,825, and the Doge clock allegedly has saved us 318. Well, a little bit less than that, but rounding up, $318 billion. Crazy sauce. U.S. federal debt to GDP. 1960 it was 53%. 1980 it was 34%. 2000 it was 58%, and right now it is 122%. We were talking about, before we get back to her deal, what percentage of Chinese trade is with the United States? In 2022, Chinese exports to the United States accounted for 16% of China's total exports. This makes the U.S. China's largest export partner. China's imports from the U.S. were not explicitly stated in the provided results, but China was identified as the largest supplier of goods to the United States in 2022, accounting for 16.5% overall. What is the percentage of China in world trade overall? Over the past several decades, Chinese trade has expanded at a breakneck pace. In 1995, the value of China's imports and exports of goods totaled $280.9 billion, or 3% of the global trade. By 2018, its trade, and for 2018, so 23 years later, its total trade in goods had jumped to $4.6 trillion, a whopping 12.4% of global trade. So their market is no slouch either. And they have built a ton more partners to trade with. There's a China dependence on U.S. trade chart that comes out as well, that gives you a percentage of what they are dependent on the U.S. The biggest one, consumer electronics. 22% of their consumer electronics go to America. 19% of home appliances, 17% of clothes, optics, wood, paper. Construction materials, 13. Electrical equipment, 13. Clean energy and batteries, 13. Chemicals, 12. And, very small. Semiconductors, 4%. Very small. We're going to listen up a little bit more about her issues. Ready?
National debt. Interest costs to service that debt have already surpassed defense spending and Medicare spending. It is now second to Social Security costs. As you can see here, the interest on national debt is expected to rise sharply as the federal government's ability to cover other important programs, such as defense and social entitlements, will continue to weaken. That is a signal investors are selling U.S. assets and moving their money elsewhere right now. Traditionally, a strong U.S. dollar was a given. It's been the world's reserve currency for decades, and investors trusted the government to protect its value. Well, that has already changed. But
that's a mistake, trust in the government, isn't it? Isn't that always a mistake? I'm with the government. I'm here to help, right? And never.
But now, even Trump's former economic advisor, Stephen Myron, is questioning that old approach and how safe the US dollar actually is in this unpredictable global environment. He argues that the strong dollar hurts US workers and global competitiveness. The instability in U.S. economic and more specifically trade policy makes global investors really nervous. If Washington isn't standing by the dollar like it used to, they might actually start looking elsewhere for returns, and this is precisely what they're doing. U.S. markets are underperforming. The S&P 500 is among the worst global indices this year. Meanwhile,
this is a scary graph as well that she is showing here, and this is frightening. The market summary for the S&P 500 and year to date, and how low it's gone. It's not looking too hot. But let's continue.
While Asian and European stocks are rising, even the bond market is feeling the pressure now as treasury yields increased while the value of the US dollar declined, which is a very alarming trend that supports the argument of the loss of confidence in the US dollar. Investors continue to sell US equities. The White House seems to recognize this, hinting at tariff rollbacks to calm things down, but it might be too late. U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick has warned that smartphones and other consumer electronics imported to America from China will still face tariffs. What he, referring to President Trump, doing is he's saying they're exempt from reciprocal tariffs, but they are included in the semiconductor tariffs, which are coming in probably a month or two.
The tariffs will be in place in the not distant future because, as you know, like we did with steel, like we did with automobiles, like we did with aluminum, which are now fully on, we'll be doing that with semiconductors, with chips, and numerous other things. And that'll take place in the very near future. And it'll happen very fast. It'll all happen very fast.
Do you know what rate the semiconductor tariff?
I'm going to be announcing it over the next week.
Needless to say, Lutnick's comments, coupled with President Trump's latest commentary, sparked yet another wave of concerns over the weekend and on Monday. On top of that, nearly 30% of U.S. public debt is held by foreign investors. If they start losing confidence, which they have already started to lose confidence, we're talking about serious long-term effects on America's financial stability, because once the trust in the United States dollar declines even more as the result of Washington's failed policies, it will be a challenge to build it back without foundational shifts in U.S. foreign policy and how it positions itself globally. You can't simply undo decades of bullying other countries, sanctioning them into oblivion, and flip-flopping on tariffs on a daily basis. U.S. Treasuries are traditionally regarded as the safest form of investment because they are backed by the full faith of the U.S. government. The recent sell-off is a major red flag. Investors typically sell stocks when the economy is slowing, and they turn to bonds. The problem is U.S. bonds are no longer viewed as a desirable investment, and to make them more attractive, yields would have to increase. So the recent market activity shows that neither United States equities nor bonds are viewed as highly desirable assets in this unstable and quite unpredictable geopolitical environment. The bond sell-off may be about the growing possibility of a default risk, and investors recognize this. Some analysts are now warning about a Sell America Inc. trend, the idea that foreign investors no longer see U.S. assets as the safe and dependable bet that they once were. But it's not all doom and gloom, of course, and if these risks are recognized now, and if policies are adjusted swiftly, there is still hope for a more positive outcome for the global economy, including the U.S. economy. The U.S. economy is still the largest in the world, and it does remain a powerful magnet for investment. Billions are still flowing into auto plants, tech, and data centers across the country. Even this week, a 10-year Treasury bond auction got substantial interest from buyers, which is a small but very important sign that confidence hasn't disappeared entirely. There is still some of it left. The big question is whether this is just a temporary reaction or the beginning of a fundamental reordering of global investment patterns and monetary system. If the world truly starts turning away from the US markets, it could reshape how money moves, how the dollar is valued, and even how America funds its growth. Trump's tariffs may have unintentionally sparked something much bigger than a trade war, a new era in the global economy. As the trust in the United States declines, the emergence of a multipolar world and the need to create reliable financial architecture for the global majority is that much more important.
Well, I happen to agree with most of that summing up at the end there. And I do like listening to this young lady. I went to, there was another quite good article in English that I wanted to get to today. There are 7 countries that are kicking out Americans. That it's might be becoming difficult for U.S. travelers to travel or to stay in places. Isn't that crazy? Never ever thought of something like that. Never. There's so many other ones. Let's talk about you remember me talking to you a couple of weeks ago about Val Kilmer when he passed away? There was a really good article on Tucker Carlson about Val Kilmer and what he left for his family and how he did it. He was only 65 when he passed away, and unfortunate that he did. And I went through all of that in my kind of tribute to him way back when he did pass away. But if you get a chance to see that, it's Val Kilmer leaves behind a fortune that, it's well worth the listen. What else did we have from today to discuss? There's some pretty funny commentary about the Ukraine map that the U.S. is pushing for people to consider. And my fairly good, well, he's not a friend, but I interviewed with him last year with George Galloway. If you haven't had a chance to interview a George Galloway, you should. Allegedly, there's a person who claims that Amelia Earhart mystery is finally solved. I'm not so positive about that. And so I won't say too much about it. But there's also a couple of further stories that I wanted to get to. Zelensky being one of them. Zelensky's jumping out and making, bad comments again, this time against Steve Witkoff. U.S. President Donald Trump's envoy to Special Envoy Steve Witkoff has no mandate to discuss territorial issues between Moscow and Kiev, said Ukraine's Vladimir Zelensky. Statement came in response to a journalist's question during a press conference alongside NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte in Odessa on Tuesday. The Ukrainian leader was asked to comment on Witkoff's recent remarks that a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine revolves around 5 territories. Ukraine is a sovereign state, and all territories belonging to the unitary state of Ukraine, and therefore only the people of Ukraine can speak about territories of our state, said Zelensky, recognizing any formerly Ukrainian regions as belonging to Russia is another red line for Kiev, he added. Therefore, the representative you mentioned is discussing issues outside of his competence. This is not the first time Zelensky has lashed out at Witkoff. Last month, he accused the U.S. envoy of parroting Kremlin narratives. Last week, Witkoff met with Russian President Vladimir Putin in St. Petersburg in his third direct talk since February, which come as part of Trump's efforts toward ending the Ukraine conflict. Key part of any peace deal would have to involve the recognition of Crimea, Donetsk, Lugansk, Kherson, Zaporizhia regions as part of Russia. The envoy told Fox News during an interview on Tuesday. Crimea joined Russia in 2014, while the other regions joined in 2022, each following referenda. While many more complicated issues need to be resolved, the negotiations may be on the cusp of something very, very important for the world at large, said Witkoff. Moscow has previously stressed that it has always been open to peace talks, provided any deal addressed the key cause of the concern. Russia maintains that Ukraine needs to demilitarize, denazify, maintain neutrality, and stay out of NATO, as well as recognize territorial realities on the ground. Kremlin spokesman Peskov refused to divulge details on what was discussed with the U.S. envoy on Friday, but noted that Moscow values the constructive and substantive dialogue with Washington. Russia has the political will to move forward toward a peace deal, he added, speaking to journalists on Tuesday. I like it. A good article. There was something else I wanted to get to today about Poland, but we'll push that back one. There's the EU has delayed Russian energy withdrawal plan. The postponement is reportedly linked in part to discussions over the future of sabotaged Nord Stream pipelines. the EU will once again delay plans to eliminate its dependence on Russian energy amid ongoing debate with the bloc over the future of Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines, says the Financial Times. Nord Stream 1, which once delivered Russian natural gas to Germany, and Nord Stream 2 were damaged in a sabotage attack in 2022. However, one string of Nord Stream 2 remains intact. Talks of potentially reviving the pipelines have resurfaced amid recent joint efforts by Russia and the U.S. to end the Ukraine conflict. Originally slated for release in February, a roadmap detailing steps for cutting the EU's energy reliance on Russia by 2027 was put off until March and is now expected to be unveiled in May, said the outlet. Uncertainty over U.S. President Donald Trump's proposed tariffs also reportedly contributed to the postponement, as the energy trade could become a key issue in EU-U.S. negotiation. It's a mess, an EU diplomat stated. How does the U.S. fit into all of this? How do we diversify? Brussels is reportedly seeking legal mechanisms that could enable EU communities to break long-term Russian gas contracts without facing penalties from Moscow. Interesting. There are also concerns that any resulting legislation could be vetoed by Hungary and Slovakia, which are now receiving the bulk of the remaining Russian pipeline gas delivered to the EU. The EU declared its intention of weaning itself off of Russia's energy following the escalation of the Ukraine conflict in 2022. Supplies of U.S. gas have replaced much of the cheaper pipeline gas previously delivered by Russia. Although Russian pipeline gas supplies to the EU have plummeted since 2022, the bloc ramped up imports of liquefied natural gas from the sanctioned country last year. In 2024, Russia still accounted for 19% of the bloc's total gas and LNG supply, according to various estimates. Brussels has yet to specify the measures it intends to propose to speed up the phasing out of Russian energy. Some experts have reportedly suggested imposing tariffs. The development comes as EU industry leaders have suggested a resumption of gas purchases from Russia. According to Reuters, Germany's chemical industry is facing a severe crisis and urgently needs a return of affordable Russian gas. French energy giants Engie and Total also said they could envision resuming Russian energy imports. Well, that, I believe, is what Trump is attempting to accomplish with these ceasefire talks. I believe that's what it's all about. We've already read that one. And we already read this. Let's see what else we can come to. Is there an opinion piece for me today? I believe there is. I think you got this yesterday. The Sumi missile strike, war propaganda, yes. Plenty of interesting news here. J.D. Vance has stated that Washington is frustrated with European leaders. We could go into that, I think. Let's see. Here's a good one. This is not very helpful for the economy. Okay, this is not a way to punish Russia appropriately, especially if you're trying to convince them that you want to start working together. Democratic bill threatens more sanctions on Russia. Proposed legislation reportedly aims to compel Trump to give additional support to Ukraine. A bill introduced by Democratic lawmakers in the House of Reps on Monday threatens to impose additional sanctions on Russia in support of Ukraine. The legislation, which is not yet public, is designed to deter Donald Trump from pursuing closer ties with Russia at the expense of Kiev. I thought foreign policy was the realm of the president and the president alone, except for the declaring of war. Perhaps I'm incorrect. Maybe someone could tell me why. The bill was reportedly sponsored by Gregory Meeks, the ranking member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. According to Reuters, it mandates U.S. involvement in Ukraine's reconstruction, continued military aid through direct loans and financing, and sanctions targeting Russian financial institutions, oil and mining sectors, and certain officials. Nonsense again. Congressional aides told Reuters that the bill would likely struggle to pass in the Republican majority House. However, their objective is to influence negotiations on any Ukraine-related legislation eventually passed by Congress, with some of the bill's language expected to appear in any final broad Ukraine package debated on Capitol Hill, the report noted. I am dead against any of this. It is not our war, never was, we shouldn't be there. Trump says it, but he doesn't do much to prevent it so far. While Trump has said he seeks mutually beneficial cooperation with Russia, he's also threatened to significantly increase pressure on Moscow if he believes the latter is not negotiating in good faith over Ukraine. All you got to do is listen to Zelensky's ridiculous interview on Sunday, and that boy ain't negotiating in good faith. How can he expect it of Russia? While Trump has said he seeks mutually beneficial cooperation, he has also threatened to significantly increase pressure on Moscow if he believes... Oh, I already read that. Sorry. Russia has expressed a willingness to resolve the conflict, but always points out Ukraine's repeated violations of U.S. proposed moratorium on strikes against energy infrastructure. Earlier in April, a bipartisan group introduced a separate piece of legislation targeting Russia. According to its key sponsor, veteran foreign policy hawk Lindsey Graham, hello, how's the family? The bill would sanction the hell out of Moscow. Lindsey Graham just loves his war. That guy needs to go, is all I'm saying. Jesus. Critics accuse Trump of taking a lenient approach toward Russia in his attempts to mend diplomatic ties. Yeah, the president has acknowledged that NATO's expansion in Europe since the 90s is an important factor in the Ukraine conflict. Supporters of Kiev maintain, it's about time somebody took that blaming anyone but Moscow for the hostilities constitutes a distortion of history. Now, I disagree. Okay? Additionally, the Trump administration is working to finalize so-called minerals deal with Kiev. He claims that gaining access to Ukraine's natural resources will help recoup much of the billions of dollars spent on the conflict by former President Joe Biden. Trump has characterized the state of affairs as an abuse of American generosity by Ukraine and Washington's European allies. Well, friends and neighbors, I appreciate you being a part of the show today and joining us in. I like hearing from you. I enjoy your calls. I hope that you make your own decisions and read and listen to information from many different places, including this show. I will point out that once again, my name is Samuel Trapp. You are listening to Damn Radio. You can follow my show on a podcast at internationalflavor.podbean.com, and I hope that you do. Have a very good evening, and join us in again tomorrow, and follow the schedule at damradio.com/schedule to find them all out. Tomorrow's big day. Tomorrow's Wednesday, the biggest day of the week for Damn Radio, and I hope you all listen to us and join us for every show that is played tomorrow. We appreciate you, and hope that you continue your support of our hosts and of this